The millionaire businessman who woke up next to a stranger after a night of drinking. Hello, let's start another beautiful story. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's go. Tom Blake stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in hues of gold and purple. His reflection showed a man at the pinnacle of success, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, commanding posture, and the confident smile that had graced countless magazine covers. At 42, he had built Blake Enterprises into a technology empire that transformed how the world did business. The Peters Group just signed. His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "It's official, Mr. Blake." Tom's smile widened. The Peters deal was the crown jewel of his career, a $2.4 billion merger that would revolutionize sustainable energy infrastructure across North America. He picked up his phone to share the news, then paused. Who would he call first? His closest relationship these days was with his stock portfolio. The thought was fleeting, brushed aside like an unwanted crumb from his immaculate desk. Success required sacrifice. He'd learned that lesson early. His younger sister Emma's words from their last argument echoed in his mind. "You've built an empire of everything except what matters." He pushed the memory away. Emma had always been the family idealist, never understanding the real world's demands. His phone buzzed, a message from Robert Chen, his old college roommate and now Miami's top real estate developer. "Heard about Peters, party at the Velvet Room tonight, time to celebrate like the old days." Tom hesitated. He had an early morning meeting with the board to discuss the merger's implementation, but the adrenaline of victory coursed through his veins, demanding release. When was the last time he'd truly celebrated anything? "Cancel tomorrow's meetings," he told his assistant. "I'm flying to Miami tonight." 3 hours later, Tom's private jet touched down in Miami. The city's warm breeze carried promises of liberation from New York's constant pressure. The Velvet Room occupied the top floor of the prestigious Sovereign Hotel, its glass walls offering panoramic views of Biscayne Bay. "The conquering hero arrives," Robert's booming voice carried across the crowded rooftop lounge. He embraced Tom, pressing a glass of aged scotch into his hand. "To the man who makes the impossible look easy." The night blurred into a cascade of congratulations, drinks, and increasingly loud music. Tom felt the careful walls he'd built around himself beginning to crack. Here he wasn't Tom Blake, CEO and business titan. He was just Tom, riding the wave of triumph, letting go of the constant control that defined his life. "You look like you could use some air," a voice cut through his thoughts. He turned to find a woman watching him with amused interest. She wore a simple black dress that somehow stood out among the room's designer fashions, her dark hair falling in natural waves past her shoulders. But it was her eyes that caught him, sharp, observant, almost challenging. "I'm fine," Tom replied automatically, the practiced response of someone used to deflecting concern. She raised an eyebrow. "That's the problem with men like you. You're always fine, even when you're drowning." Her directness caught him off guard. People didn't speak to Tom Blake this way, not anymore. They agreed, they flattered, they sought approval. They didn't call him out while casually sipping a martini. "And what kind of man am I?" he asked, surprising himself with his interest in her answer. "The kind who's built such a perfect cage that you've forgotten it's still a cage." She set down her glass. "I'm Louise, by the way. Louise Carter. Tom Blake. I know who you are, Mr. Blake. Everyone here does. The question is, do you?" Before he could respond, Robert appeared, pulling Tom away for another round of introductions. When he looked back, Louise had vanished into the crowd, leaving him with an unsettling feeling that she'd seen right through his carefully constructed facade. The night continued its spiraling dance. More drinks appeared, boundaries blurred, and the weight of perpetual perfection began to slip from Tom's shoulders. In his pocket, his phone buzzed repeatedly. Emails about the merger, messages from his executive team, a text from Emma that he ignored. The last clear memory he had was standing at the rooftop's edge, looking out over Miami's glittering nightscape. Louise's words echoing in his mind. Everything after that disappeared into a haze of music, laughter, and the intoxicating feeling of letting go. He didn't know it then, but in less than 12 hours, his perfect life would begin to unravel, starting with a wake-up call in a strange room next to a woman who would force him to question everything he'd built his empire upon. Consciousness returned to Tom like a slow-motion car crash, inevitable, painful, and accompanied by an overwhelming sense of dread. The first thing he noticed was the light. His Manhattan penthouse faced west. Morning sun never reached his bedroom. Yet here it was, harsh Miami sunshine streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting unfamiliar walls in blinding gold. His head throbbed as he forced his eyes open. The room slowly came into focus. Modern art on cream walls, clothes scattered across plush carpet, a half-empty bottle of champagne on a glass coffee table. Not his suite at the Sovereign, not any room he recognized. Movement beside him froze the breath in his lungs. Dark hair spilled across white pillows, the gentle rise and fall of breathing under silk sheets. Louise Carter lay sleeping beside him, one arm draped gracefully over her face, blocking the morning light. No, 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 Tom whispered, memories of the previous night flickering through his mind like a broken film reel. Louise at the bar, challenging him, dancing, more drinks. A laugh as he told stories he never shared with anyone, but after that, nothing but fragments and sensations. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, display showing 27 missed calls and 43 unread messages. The top notification made his blood run cold. Breaking. Blake Enterprises CEO seen in Miami hotel altercation. Tom snatched the phone, hands shaking as he opened the article. A grainy photo showed him in the hotel lobby, tie loosened, gesturing angrily at someone just out of frame. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. Your perfect world starting to crack. He turned to find Louise awake, watching him with those same penetrating eyes from the night before. She sat up, completely at ease with the situation, wrapping the sheet around herself. What happened last night? Tom demanded, fighting to keep his voice steady. How did we end up here? Which version would you prefer? Louise reached for a glass of water on her nightstand. The one that preserves your carefully crafted image, or the truth? I don't have time for games, Tom snapped, already scrolling through his emails. The Peters Group was expressing concerns about his behavior. His board wanted an emergency meeting. Robert had sent 5 messages asking if he was okay. No games, Louise said, her voice softening slightly. But last night wasn't as simple as you're hoping it was. The question is, are you ready to face what really happened? Before Tom could respond, his phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Hope you enjoyed the party, Mr. Blake. Your reputation was fun while it lasted. I need to go, Tom said, gathering his clothes. His suit was wrinkled, his tie missing. Whatever happened last night was exactly what you needed, Louise finished. She stood, wrapping herself in a silk robe. But go ahead, run back to your perfect life. Just know that sooner or later, the truth has a way of catching up. Tom's fingers fumbled with his shirt buttons. Is that a threat? An observation? Louise walked to the window, looking out over Miami's skyline. You're not the first powerful man I've watched try to outrun his demons, Tom. But you might be the first one worth saving. Another buzz from his phone, this time from his sister Emma. Please tell me you didn't do anything stupid. Call me. Your sister sounds worried, Louise noted, glimpsing the message. Funny how family can see the cracks in our armor long before anyone else. Tom froze. How do you know about my sister? Louise's smile was enigmatic. You talked a lot last night. About Emma, about your parents, about the lonely boy who built an empire to prove his worth. The question is, how much of last night do you remember? The room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Tom grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, but Louise's voice stopped him. Check your jacket pocket. He reached in, fingers closing around a small object. He pulled out a hotel keycard, not from the Sovereign, but from the Carlton across town. "What is this?" "The beginning of the truth," Louise said. "Room 1242. You might want to visit before checking your social media. Some memories are better faced in private." Tom stared at the keycard, his perfectly ordered world tilting on its axis. In the distance, his phone kept buzzing, the sound of reality demanding attention, of consequences rushing toward him like an incoming tide. "Who are you really?" he asked, hand on the doorknob. Louise's reflection in the window smiled sadly. "Someone who knows what it's like to lose everything. The only difference is, I chose to lose it. You're about to have it taken from you." Tom left without another word, stepping into a hallway he didn't recognize in a hotel he'd never heard of. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from Mark Harris, his business partner. "Board meeting in 2 hours. I tried to stop them, but after last night. You need to get back to New York, now." He leaned against the wall, the key card burning a hole in his pocket. Room 1242 at the Carlton held answers, but did he really want them? Sometimes ignorance wasn't just bliss, it was survival. But Louise's words echoed in his mind. The truth has a way of catching up. And judging by the growing storm on his phone, it was catching up faster than he'd ever imagined possible. The Carlton Hotel loomed before Tom, its Art Deco facade a stark contrast to the modern glass towers surrounding it. His driver waited in the idling car, watching with concern as Tom stood frozen on the sidewalk, the key card to room 1242 heavy in his hand. His phone showed 47 minutes until the emergency board meeting, barely enough time to make it to the airport if he left now. "Sir!" the driver called out. "The jet is fueled and ready." Tom's thumb hovered over Mark Harris's number. Mark would handle the board, buy him time. He always did. That's why Tom had made him partner 5 years ago. Mark was the fixer, the one who made problems disappear. But Louise's words haunted him. Some memories are better faced in private. "Give me 15 minutes, Tom told the driver, already striding through the Carlton's ornate entrance. The lobby was a throwback to Miami's golden age. Brass fixtures, marble floors, palm fronds casting elaborate shadows. At this hour, it was nearly empty save for a lone desk clerk who barely glanced up as Tom passed. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt eternal. Tom loosened his collar, his reflection in the mirrored wall showing a man he barely recognized. His carefully maintained appearance was in shambles, designer suit wrinkled, 5 o'clock shadow darkening his jaw, eyes haunted by questions he couldn't answer. Room 1242 was at the end of a long hallway. The keycard trembled slightly as he held it to the lock. Green light, soft click, and the door swung open to reveal nothing. The room was immaculate. Bed made, curtains drawn. No sign anyone had been there at all. Tom was about to leave when he noticed the blinking light on the room's phone, a message waiting. He pressed play, his own voice filling the silence. "It's done. I've got everything we need. The documents, the proof, all of it. Mark won't know what hit him until it's too late. I'm sending Emma the backup files now. If anything happens to me—" The message cut off. Tom played it again, his hangover forgotten in a surge of adrenaline. Documents. Proof of what? He had no memory of making this call, no idea what documents he was talking about. His phone buzzed, Emma calling for the 5th time. This time, he answered. "Tom, thank God. Are you okay? I got your email last night, but I couldn't open the files." "What email?" Tom interrupted. "What files?" "The ones you sent at 3 a.m. The subject line was insurance." "Tom, what's going on? You sounded strange in your message, talking about Mark and some kind of evidence." Tom's blood ran cold. "Emma, forward me that email. Now." "I tried, but it bounced back, and now I can't even open it anymore. It's like the files corrupted themselves." A knock at the door silenced them both. Tom turned to see Mark Harris himself, standing in the doorway, immaculate in a navy suit, his trademark reassuring smile firmly in place. "There you are," Mark said smoothly. "I've been looking everywhere. The board's waiting." "How did you find me?" Please, Tom, I'm your partner. Finding people is what I do. Mark stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. Rough night? You could say that. Tom watched Mark carefully. Years of business instinct screaming danger. I was just about to head to the airport. About that. Mark's smile didn't waver. The board meeting's been postponed. More pressing matters have come up. Like the interesting conversation I had with Louise Carter this morning. The name hit Tom like a physical blow. You know Louise? Oh, we go way back. Fascinating woman. She's caused quite a bit of trouble for several prominent businessmen in Miami, though usually they remember their time with her. Mark's eyes hardened. What exactly do you remember about last night, Tom? Emma's voice was tiny through the phone. Tom, who's there? What's happening? Tom ended the call, never taking his eyes off Mark. Why don't you tell me, since you seem to know so much about it? I know you accessed files you shouldn't have, made copies you shouldn't have, said things to certain people that could be problematic for the company. Mark straightened his already perfect tie. But I'm here to help, just like always. We can make this go away. Unless what? Unless you'd rather explore whatever theory led you to those files in the first place. The choice is yours, Tom, but choose carefully. Some doors, once opened, can't be closed. Tom's phone buzzed again. A message from Louise. Don't trust him. Mark noticed the text. Ah, Louise again. Did she mention she's been under FBI investigation for corporate espionage? That she specializes in manipulating powerful men when they're vulnerable? Tom's head spun. The voicemail, the missing files, Emma's email, Louise's warnings, Mark's convenient appearance. None of it added up, yet all of it felt connected to whatever had happened last night. He had seconds to decide. Trust his partner of 5 years, the man who'd helped build his empire, or follow the breadcrumbs left by a mysterious woman who seemed to know far too much about his life. Time's running out, Tom, Mark said softly. What's it going to be? Through the window, Tom could see his driver still waiting, the jet ready to whisk him back to his perfectly controlled life in New York. All he had to do was walk away. Let Mark handle everything like he always did. But for the first time in years, Tom didn't want control. He wanted the truth. I think, he said carefully, I need to make a few calls. Mark's smile flickered. That would be unwise. Probably, Tom agreed, already dialing Emma's number again. But then again, so was trusting you with those offshore accounts, wasn't it? The words came from nowhere. A fragment of memory suddenly crystallizing. Mark's face went perfectly still, and Tom knew he'd stumbled onto something real, something dangerous. The game was on. The next 2 hours became a blur of motion and mounting tension. After Mark's departure from the Carlton, marked by thinly veiled threats wrapped in corporate pleasantries, Tom found himself in a sleek downtown Miami cafe, his laptop open to Blake Enterprises' financial records. Emma sat across from him, her usual artistic chaos contained in a simple sundress, her expression wavering between concern and vindication. I've been telling you for years that Mark was trouble, she said, sliding a fresh espresso toward him. But you always said I was too suspicious, too quick to judge people. Tom rubbed his temples, fighting both his hangover and the growing realization that his sister had been right all along. You're an artist, Emma. You see the world in shades of grey. I needed to see it in black and white. Numbers, facts, profits. And now I'm seeing red. Tom turned the laptop toward her, pointing to a series of transactions. These offshore transfers Mark's been handling, they're just the tip of the iceberg. Last night, I must have found something bigger, something worth silencing me over. Emma leaned forward, her bracelets jingling against the table. That's what was in the email you sent, the one I can't open. Has to be. The question is, where would I have gotten that information, and why can't I remember? Tom's phone buzzed. Another message from Louise. The Velvet Room, 1 p.m. Come alone? Emma caught his expression. Let me guess, the mysterious Louise. She knows something, Emma. She's been 2 steps ahead of this whole thing since it started. Or she's working with Mark to manipulate you. Emma reached across the table, gripping his hand. Think about it, Tom. You close the biggest deal of your career, coincidentally end up at a party where you meet a beautiful, mysterious woman who just happens to be connected to your corrupt business partner. It's too perfect. Tom withdrew his hand, standing. Maybe, but right now, she's the only lead I've got. Then I'm coming with you. No. Tom's voice was firm. Mark's already threatened me. I won't put you at risk, too. I'm already at risk, Emma countered. But I'm the one with the corrupted email, remember. Besides, you've spent your whole life protecting me. Maybe it's time I returned the favor. Before Tom could argue, his phone exploded with notifications. Breaking news alerts, messages from board members, frantic texts from his PR team. His stomach dropped as he read the headlines. Blake Enterprises under federal investigation. CEO Tom Blake's Miami meltdown, more than just partying. Sources claim Blake Enterprises involved in massive financial scandal. They're moving fast, Emma whispered, reading over his shoulder. Tom's phone rang. Robert Chen. He answered on speaker. Tom, what the hell is happening? The SEC just showed up at the Sovereign with questions about last night. They're saying something about financial records being accessed, unauthorized transfers. Robert, I need you to think carefully. What exactly do you remember about last night? When did I leave the party? A pause. That's just it. I don't remember you leaving. 1 minute you were there with that artist woman, Louise, and the next... Artist woman, Emma interrupted. What do you mean? Louise Carter. She's pretty well known in Miami's art scene. Has a gallery in Wynwood. Does these intense installations about corporate corruption and wealth inequality. She's had run-ins with several prominent businessmen, always at fancy parties, always seems to be around when scandals break. Tom and Emma exchanged looks. Another piece of the puzzle, but did it implicate Louise or exonerate her? Robert, I need everything you can find on Louise Carter. And I mean everything. Already on it. But Tom, whatever you do, don't leave Miami. The FBI's involved now. This is bigger than just SEC violations. The call ended, leaving Tom and Emma in stunned silence. Through the cafe window, Tom could see news vans starting to gather outside. Word of his location had leaked. Still want to go meet Louise alone? Emma asked quietly. Tom checked his watch. 12:45 p.m. The Velvet Room was 15 minutes away. Outside, reporters were already approaching the cafe entrance. No, he said finally, but I need you to do something else, something just as dangerous. Name it. Go to Louise's gallery in Wynwood. See what you can find out about her work, her connections, if she's really an artist with a vendetta against corrupt businessmen. She might have been targeting you all along, Emma finished. Or she might be the only person who can help me prove what Mark's been doing. Tom stood, leaving cash on the table. Either way, we've got exactly 1 hour before the FBI figures out where I am. Let's make it count. They parted ways at the cafe's back entrance, Emma heading to Wynwood, Tom to the Velvet Room. As he navigated Miami's busy streets, fragments of memories from the previous night began to surface. Louise's knowing smile, Mark's name coming up in conversation, a heated argument in the hotel lobby, and something about a hidden safe in Mark's office. His phone buzzed one final time, an anonymous email containing a single photo. It showed him and Louise in what appeared to be an office, hunched over a computer screen, time-stamped 3:17 a.m. In the background, a safe stood open. The caption read, "Did you really think Mark was the only one with something to hide?" Tom's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he pulled up to the Velvet Room. Louise was already waiting outside, wearing the same enigmatic smile from last night. But this time, Tom noticed something else in her expression. Fear. Whatever game they were playing, whatever truth lay hidden in the gaps of his memory. One thing was becoming clear. They were all in dangerous waters now, and the sharks were circling. The Velvet Room looked different in daylight, less glamorous, more stark. Cleaning staff moved through the space like ghosts, erasing evidence of the previous night's excesses. Louise sat at the bar, a glass of water untouched before her, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows to cast her shadow across the polished floor. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come," she said without turning. "You knew I would." Tom settled onto the bar stool beside her, placing the anonymous photo between them. "Just like you knew about this." Louise studied the image, her expression unreadable. "Mark's office at the Sovereign, 3:17 a.m. You were quite insistent about going there. Why? Because you'd just spent 2 hours telling me about your suspicions, about the patterns you'd noticed in the offshore accounts, about Mark's monthly trips to the Cayman Islands." She turned to face him fully. "You were quite passionate about it, actually. Said it was time someone exposed the truth. And you just happened to be there to listen, to help." Tom's voice hardened. "An artist who specializes in corporate corruption." Louise's laugh was bitter. "You've been Googling me. Good. Then you know about my exhibitions, about the men I've exposed. Did you also learn about my father?" Tom frowned. "Your father?" "Richard Carter, former CEO of Vista Technologies, died in prison 3 years ago while serving time for corporate fraud." Louise's fingers traced patterns in the condensation on her glass. "Mark Harris was the one who helped build the case against him. The same Mark Harris who later approached you about a partnership." Across town, Emma stepped into Louise Carter's gallery in Wynwood. The space was industrial chic, exposed brick and steel beams framing massive installations. The current exhibition was titled Paper Empire, a series of sculptures made from shredded financial documents and corporate reports. A young assistant approached. "I'm sorry, we're closed for installation." Emma gestured to the nearest piece, a giant house of cards built from what appeared to be actual stock certificates. "Fascinating work. The artist seems to have intimate knowledge of corporate fraud. Ms. Carter believes in authenticity. All materials are genuine, sourced from actual corporate scandals." Emma moved to the next piece, a wall of photographs showing powerful men in compromising positions, their faces obscured by dollar signs. "And these subjects, they consented to being displayed." The assistant's smile wavered. "Ms. Carter's work often generates controversy, but she's never lost a legal challenge." Back at the Velvet Room, Tom was processing Louise's revelation. "Mark destroyed your father's company? Mark exposed my father's crimes," Louise corrected. "At least that's the official story. The truth." She pulled out her phone, showing Tom a series of emails. Mark had been manipulating Vista's books for months before the scandal broke. He created the fraud, then presented himself as the whistleblower. "My father was just a convenient scapegoat. Why are you showing me this now?" "Because history's repeating itself." Louise's eyes met his. "Those transfers you found last night, they match the pattern Mark used at Vista. He's been cooking Blake Enterprises books the same way. The only difference is, this time he didn't count on the CEO being smart enough to notice." In the gallery, Emma had found her way to a back room. Through the partially open door, she could see stacks of files, photographs, and what looked like surveillance equipment. On a corkboard, newspaper clippings tracked Mark Harris's career, including his role in the Vista Technologies scandal. Her phone buzzed, a text from Tom. "Louise says Mark framed her father. Check the gallery for anything about Vista Technologies." Emma's heart raced as she slipped into the room, quickly photographing the corkboard. A file labeled Project Phoenix caught her eye. Inside were photos of Tom, at meetings, at restaurants, entering his building. The surveillance went back months, finding everything you need. Emma spun to find the gallery assistant watching her, his friendly demeanor replaced by something harder. "I was just admiring the artist's process." "Ms. Carter's process is quite thorough." He stepped into the room. "She likes to understand her subjects completely before she destroys them." At the Velvet Room, Tom's phone lit up with Emma's emergency signal, 3 quick texts in succession. "I have to go." He stood abruptly. "Your sister found the surveillance photos," Louise said calmly. "I knew she would. She's as thorough as you are." You've been watching me for months. I've been building a case against Mark, against the whole corrupt system. You were supposed to be just another example of corporate greed." Louise's voice softened. "But then I got to know you. Really know you. Last night, you showed me a different side of Tom Blake. And now we're both in too deep to back out." Louise stood. "Mark's going to move the money tonight, empty the offshore accounts, erase the trail, unless what? Unless we stop him. Together." She held out a key card, this one to Mark's office at the Sovereign. "Your choice, Tom. Trust the woman who's been lying to you, or let Mark get away with everything. Again." Tom's phone buzzed frantically, Emma trying to warn him. Through the windows, he could see police cars arriving outside the Velvet Room. Time was running out. He reached for the key card, his fingers brushing Louise's. "If you're playing me, I know. I'll end up like my father." She pulled him toward a service entrance. "But right now, we need to move. Emma's about to have company, and so are we." As they slipped out of the Velvet Room, Tom could hear sirens approaching. The game was changing. Now it wasn't just about exposing Mark, it was about survival, and he still wasn't sure if Louise was his salvation or his downfall. But one thing was certain. The truth about last night was only the beginning of what he needed to uncover. Emma Blake had never considered herself brave. Creative, yes. Stubborn, definitely. But as she faced the gallery assistant in that back room full of evidence, she discovered a different kind of courage, the desperate kind that comes from having no other choice. "I have to admit," the assistant said, blocking the doorway, "we didn't expect Tom to send his sister, though it makes a certain poetic sense, the artist and the art curator, digging through each other's secrets." Emma's hand tightened around her phone. "Who's we?" "The same people who've been watching your brother for months. The same ones who knew he'd eventually figure out what Mark was doing." He gestured to the surveillance photos. "Though none of us expected him to unravel everything in one drunken night." Across town, Tom and Louise were navigating the Sovereign Hotel's service corridors, their footsteps echoing off concrete walls. Police radios crackled in the distance. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they search this floor," Louise whispered, leading them toward a maintenance elevator. "Mark's office is on the top level. The safe we found last night, it's behind the Rothko on the east wall. The one worth 20 million. Tom's mind flashed to the photo he'd seen. That's why there were no security alerts, using his office as a blind spot. Mark's been using the hotel's legitimate art collection to hide his illegal activities for years. Who questions a wealthy executive appreciating fine art?" Louise's smile was grim. "It's almost elegant." The elevator doors opened to reveal the hotel's executive floor. Mark's office suite occupied the entire east wing, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the ocean. The space was deserted. Everyone evacuated when the police arrived. "You seem to know your way around here pretty well," Tom observed, as Louise moved directly to the hidden safe. I curated the hotel's art collection." She caught his expression. "Yes, that part of my story is true. It's how I first noticed the pattern. Fine art is the perfect vehicle for money laundering. High value, subjective pricing, easily transported. And Mark used you to set it up. Just like he used you to legitimize his financial schemes." Louise's fingers danced over the safe's keypad. "The difference is, I figured it out sooner." Back at the gallery, Emma was stalling. "These surveillance photos, they're part of an art installation, right? A commentary on corporate surveillance." The assistant, who had introduced himself as Daniel, laughed. "You really don't know what your brother stumbled into, do you? Project Phoenix isn't about exposing one corrupt executive. It's about burning the whole system down." Emma's eyes darted to the corkboard, seeing the connections for the first time. Mark Harris appeared in photos with other executives, all of whom had faced scandals. Louise Carter's father was just one in a pattern. "My God," Emma whispered, "Louise isn't working alone." Finally catching up, Daniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. Your brother was supposed to be just another corrupt CEO, exposed by a crusading artist. But then he had to play hero, didn't he? Had to dig deeper. Emma's phone buzzed. A text from Tom. "Get out, now!" "Mark's men coming?" But Daniel was already reaching for her phone. "I'll take that." In Mark's office, the safe swung open to reveal stacks of documents and a laptop. Louise grabbed the computer while Tom gathered the papers. Bank transfers, shell companies, art purchases. Tom scanned the documents quickly. "Everything we need to prove what he's been doing." "Tom." Louise's voice was strange. He looked up to find her staring at her phone. "We have a problem." "A message from Daniel. He has Emma." Tom's blood ran cold. "Who's Daniel?" "He works for the same people I do, or did. A group dedicated to exposing corporate corruption. But lately, they've become extreme." Louise's hands shook slightly. "They're not just about exposing the truth anymore. They want to destroy the whole system, no matter the cost. And Emma? They'll trade her for the evidence. And you?" Louise met his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Tom. This isn't what I wanted. I thought I could handle both sides, help you expose Mark while satisfying the group's agenda. But now my sister's in danger because of your crusade." Tom's voice was ice. "Where would they take her?" "The gallery has a basement installation space. It's soundproof, isolated." Louise stepped toward him. "But you can't just walk in there. They'll be expecting that." "Watch me." Tom pulled out his phone, dialing Robert Chen's number. "Remember how you said I talked a lot last night? Told you all about my suspicions about Mark?" His eyes locked with Louise's. "What exactly did I tell you about the FBI agents I've been feeding information to for the past month?" Louise's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You were playing us, all of us." Tom's smile was hard as he spoke into the phone. "Robert, Operation Phoenix is compromised. Execute the warrants, all of them." Behind them, the elevator dinged. Mark Harris stepped out, flanked by 2 security guards. "I'm afraid those warrants won't be necessary, Tom. Not when we can handle this like businessmen." Through the glass walls, Miami's skyline sparkled in the afternoon sun. In the distance, sirens wailed, and somewhere in a basement gallery, Emma Blake waited, hoping her brother had one more move left to play. The endgame was beginning. The tension in Mark's office crackled like static before a storm. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, storm clouds gathered over Miami's skyline, a fitting backdrop for the showdown unfolding on the top floor of the Sovereign. "You know what your problem is, Tom." Mark settled into his leather chair, the picture of corporate calm. "You never learned to enjoy success. Always digging, always questioning, never satisfied with winning. Maybe because I learned what winning really cost." Tom remained standing, positioning himself between Louise and the guards. "How many companies did you destroy before Vista Technologies? How many lives ruined before you set your sights on Blake Enterprises?" Mark's smile tightened. "Louise has been filling your head with conspiracy theories, I see. Tell me, did she mention her own role in all this? How she's been playing both sides?" Louise stepped forward, but Tom raised a hand to stop her. "Oh, I know exactly what Louise has been doing. Just like I know about Project Phoenix, the offshore accounts, and the art fraud scheme." He pulled out his phone, showing a series of emails. "I've known for months." The revelation hit Louise like a physical blow. The drunken confession last night. "You were playing me." "Not entirely." Tom's expression softened slightly. "I needed to confirm who you were really working for, whether you were Mark's accomplice or just another pawn in his game." "Enough drama," Mark cut in. "Where are the files from the safe?" "Right here." Tom patted his jacket. "Along with every piece of evidence I've been collecting for the FBI over the past 6 months. Every conversation, every transfer, every deal you thought I was too distracted to notice." Mark's composed facade cracked slightly. "You're bluffing. The Tom Blake I know would never risk his reputation, his company. The Tom Blake you knew died the day you approached me about Vista Technologies." Tom's voice hardened. "I did my homework. Mark, I knew what happened to Richard Carter. What really happened." In the gallery basement, Emma listened intently to the argument above, her hands working steadily at the zip ties binding her wrists. Daniel had underestimated her. Artists were good with their hands, after all. "You really think you've figured it all out?" Daniel paced the basement, agitated. "Project Phoenix is bigger than your brother's little corporate drama. We're trying to expose the entire corrupt system by becoming part of it." Emma's voice dripped disdain. "Surveillance, kidnapping, blackmail. You're just using different weapons to fight the same war." Back in the office, the revelations continued to unfold. "It was never about money, was it?" Louise asked Mark. "Vista, Blake Enterprises, they were just stepping stones." "To what?" Tom pressed. Mark's laugh was genuine. "You still don't see it. The companies were irrelevant. What mattered was the pattern, creating corruption, exposing it, positioning myself as the solution. Each scandal made me more valuable, more trusted, the man who could spot corporate fraud because he'd seen it before. Until you met me," Tom said quietly. "The CEO who actually paid attention. You were supposed to be like all the others, too busy enjoying success to notice the details." Mark stood, straightening his tie. "Instead, you spent 6 months building a case against me. I have to admit I'm almost impressed." "Almost isn't good enough." Tom's phone buzzed. "That's the FBI receiving my signal. In about 30 seconds, this building will be swarming with agents, unless you tell me where my sister is." Mark's smile returned. "Ah, yes, Emma. Currently enjoying the hospitality of Louise's associates." "Tell me, Louise, did you really think you could play both sides forever? That your little anti-corporate crusade wouldn't eventually collapse under its own hypocrisy?" Louise's face paled. "Daniel wouldn't hurt her. That's not what Project Phoenix is about." "Project Phoenix stopped being about justice a long time ago," Tom interrupted. "It's just another scheme now, using idealism to mask greed. Mark feeds them information about corrupt executives. They expose the scandals, and everyone profits from the chaos." A crash from below made them all jump. Shouts and footsteps echoed up the stairwell. "That would be Emma," Tom smiled. "She's good with knots, remember, artists' hands." Mark's composure finally shattered. He lunged for his desk drawer, but Tom was faster. Years of competitive rowing had kept him in better shape than anyone suspected. They grappled briefly before Tom pinned him against the window. Miami's darkening sky, a dramatic backdrop. "It's over, Mark. The FBI has everything. The real records, the offshore accounts, your connections to Project Phoenix. Emma's gathering the last piece of evidence from the gallery right now." Louise watched the scene unfold, tears streaming down her face. I believed we were fighting for something bigger." "You were," Tom said softly. "But somewhere along the way, you forgot what justice really looks like." The office door burst open. FBI agents flooded in, followed by a disheveled but triumphant Emma clutching a hard drive. "Project Phoenix's entire database," she announced. "Every scandal, every connection, every piece of evidence they collected. Daniel really should have checked my pockets for lockpicks." As the agents read Mark his rights, Tom turned to Louise. "I meant what I said last night, you know, about understanding why you did it, about wanting to help. Was any of it real?" she asked. "Any of what you told me?" Tom thought about the night before, the connection they'd shared, the truths hidden beneath their mutual deceptions. The details were staged, the feelings. Those might have been more real than either of us intended. Outside, the storm finally broke. The rain lashed against the windows as Mark was led away, his perfect facade washed away like watercolors in the downpour. Emma hugged her brother, both of them watching as Louise was quietly escorted out, not in handcuffs, but clearly no longer free to continue her crusade. "What happens now?" Emma asked. Tom looked out at the storm-swept city, thinking about the months of rebuilding ahead. "So now we learn how to win the right way." The rain continued to fall, washing away the last traces of the perfect life Tom Blake had once lived. But for the first time in years, he felt truly clean. The next 48 hours unfolded like a corporate earthquake, aftershocks rippling through Miami's business community and beyond. Tom sat in Robert Chen's private office, watching CNN's coverage of Mark's perp walk while rain continued to drum against the windows. The headline crawler told the story in brutal simplicity. Blake Enterprises COO arrested in massive fraud scheme. They're calling it the biggest corporate fraud case since Enron, Robert said, placing a fresh coffee in front of Tom. Though you might want to switch to something stronger. Tom shook his head. I need to stay sharp. The board meeting's in 3 hours. They can wait. You just brought down a criminal enterprise that's been operating for years. Take a moment to breathe. But breathing felt like a luxury Tom couldn't afford. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since Mark's arrest. Investors demanding answers, reporters seeking statements, employees afraid for their jobs. The Peters Group had already announced they were reviewing their merger agreement. Emma entered, carrying a stack of newspapers. You made the front page of everything from the Wall Street Journal to the Miami Herald. Though my personal favorite is this one. She tossed a tabloid on the desk. Billionaire CEO's wild night exposed as FBI sting. At least they got the jilted wild night part right. Tom attempted a smile. How's the gallery situation? Police finished their sweep. Louise's group had files on half the Fortune 500. They'd been planning takedowns of at least a dozen other CEOs. Emma's expression softened. They found her father's old case files too. She really believed she was finishing his work. Tom's phone buzzed again, a message from his FBI handler. Louise cooperating, full immunity in exchange for testimony against Mark and Project Phoenix leadership. She'll land on her feet, Robert observed. Women like that always do. She was right about one thing, Tom said quietly. The system is broken. Mark didn't create the corruption. He just exploited what was already there. A knock at the door interrupted them. Robert's assistant entered with a tablet. Mr. Blake, the initial market response. Tom held up a hand. Let me guess, our stock is in freefall. Actually, sir. She handed him the tablet. The screen showed Blake Enterprises' stock price rising steadily. You're being hailed as a corporate whistleblower. The FBI's public statement about your cooperation has investors seeing you as part of the solution, not the problem. Emma read over his shoulder. Look at the comments on financial blogs. Finally, a CEO who puts ethics before profits. Blake shows corporate America how to clean house. She squeezed his shoulder. Your perfect image might have cracked, but something better is taking its place. Tom set down the tablet, moving to the window. Miami's skyline was emerging from the storm, sunlight breaking through clouds. Somewhere in that glittering maze of steel and glass, Mark was sitting in a federal holding cell, while Louise was probably giving her statement to prosecutors. I keep thinking about what you said, he told Emma, about building an empire of everything except what matters. You were right. I usually am. She joined him at the window. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Tom's answer was interrupted by Robert's assistant returning. Sir, the board is requesting to move the meeting up. They're all assembled in the conference room. Already? Tom checked his watch. That's 2 hours early. They're nervous, Robert said. Mark's arrest, the FBI investigation, the Peters merger hanging by a thread. They want answers. No, Tom straightened his tie. A plan forming. They want certainty, and I'm going to give them something better, honesty. Emma caught his expression. I know that look. What are you planning? A reconstruction, not just of the company, but of how we do business. Tom gathered his files. Mark showed us how easy it is to hide corruption behind profits. Maybe it's time someone showed a different way. The shareholders will revolt, Robert warned. Let them. We've been chasing the wrong metrics anyway. Tom headed for the door, then paused. Emma, will you sit in on the board meeting? She blinked in surprise. Me? I'm an art curator, not a businesswoman. Exactly. We need someone who sees the world differently, someone who understands that value isn't just about numbers. The siblings shared a look, years of distance dissolving in a moment of understanding. Emma nodded. As they walked to the conference room, Tom's phone buzzed one final time. A message from Louise. "Be careful. Changing the system makes you a target." Tom typed back, "Some targets are worth being." The board members rose as Tom entered, their faces a mix of concern and calculation. He could almost hear Mark's voice. "Play it safe. Tell them what they want to hear. Protect the status quo." Instead, Tom took a deep breath and began, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming early. What I'm about to propose will either revolutionize this company or end my career. Either way, it's time for some radical honesty." Emma watched her brother with pride as he launched into his presentation. The perfect life he'd built might have shattered, but from the pieces, something authentic was emerging. Sometimes, she realized, it takes a storm to clear the air. Outside, Miami's sun finally broke through completely, painting the boardroom in gold. A new day was dawning, not just for Blake Enterprises, but for the man who was finally learning that true success isn't about what you build, but how you build it. The boardroom felt smaller than Tom remembered, its mahogany walls closing in as he laid out his vision for Blake Enterprises' future. The 12 board members, some attending virtually from New York, sat in stony silence as he proposed what amounted to a corporate revolution. Full transparency in all financial transactions, real-time public access to our environmental impact data, profit sharing with employees at all levels, employee representation on the board. Tom's voice grew stronger with each point. And most importantly, a complete overhaul of our offshore operations. Franklin Pierce, the board's longest-serving member, was the first to break the silence. "Have you lost your mind? The Peters merger alone is worth billions. If we don't implement these changes, Tom interrupted, "we're just waiting for the next Mark Harris to come along. The system that allowed his fraud to flourish is still in place. A system that made us all very wealthy." Regina Walsh countered from the video screen, her New York office visible behind her. "Your own fortune was built on it, Tom. And now, I'm choosing to build something different." Tom nodded to Emma, who distributed tablets to each board member. "These are the preliminary numbers. Yes, we'll take a hit in the short term. But look at the projections for sustained growth based on ethical business practices." Pierce snorted. "Ethical business practices don't keep the lights on." "Actually," Emma spoke up, surprising everyone, "they do." She pulled up a series of charts on the boardroom's main screen. "I've spent the last 24 hours analyzing companies that prioritize transparency and ethical governance. Their long-term stability outperforms traditional corporations by an average of 23% over 10 years. "And who exactly are you?" Regina demanded. "Someone who sees patterns for a living," Emma replied coolly. "Art curation isn't so different from business analysis. It's all about understanding value beyond the surface." Tom suppressed a smile. He'd never seen his sister so commanding, so in her element. The professional distance between them had hidden how similar they really were. "This is all very inspiring," Pierce interjected, "but let's talk reality. The Peters Group is already wavering. If they pull out, they won't." Robert Chen's voice carried from the doorway. He entered holding his phone. "Just got off with their CEO. They're not just staying in. They're increasing their investment. Turns out, a partner who actively fights corruption is more valuable than one who just talks about it." The board erupted in murmurs. Tom seized the moment. Mark's arrest exposed more than just fraud. It exposed a mindset that values appearance over substance, short-term gains over lasting change. "I'm not asking for permission to reform this company. I'm telling you how it's going to be reformed." "Or what?" Regina challenged. "You'll resign?" "No." Tom's smile was razor-sharp. "I'll call a shareholders a meeting and let them decide between old money and new ethics, between business as usual and business as it should be." Pierce leaned forward. "That's a dangerous game, Tom. You're not the only one with connections. Threatening the CEO during an FBI investigation into corporate corruption." Emma's voice dripped sarcasm. "Bold strategy." The tension was broken by Tom's phone buzzing. He checked it, then projected the message onto the main screen. It was from Louise. Breaking news. Project Phoenix files reveal corruption at Vista Technologies went deeper than reported. Multiple board members implicated. Federal investigation expanding. Pierce's face went pale. Tom remembered that he'd served on Vista's board before Richard Carter's downfall. Fascinating timing, Tom noted. Almost like someone wanted to remind us that the old way of doing business has consequences. You're working with her. Regina's voice rose. That corporate terrorist? Louise Carter is cooperating with federal authorities to expose systemic corruption, Tom corrected. And yes, we're in contact. Just like I'm in contact with regulatory agencies, ethics committees, and a whole network of people tired of business as usual. He stood, commanding the room's attention. The vote is simple. Support these reforms, or face a very public shareholder battle, one that will raise questions about every decision this board has ever made. That sounds like blackmail, Pierce sputtered. No, Emma cut in. It sounds like accountability. The next hour was a blur of arguments, negotiations, and finally, votes. When the dust settled, Tom's proposals passed, not unanimously, but decisively enough. Pierce and two others resigned in protest, but the majority saw the writing on the wall. As the board members filed out, Robert lingered. You know this is just the beginning, right? The old guard won't go quietly. Good. Tom gathered his files. I'm tired of quiet. Quiet is what let Mark get away with fraud for years. Emma touched his arm. Louise's message. Did you plan that? Let's just say we have an understanding. Tom smiled. She's finding her own way to change the system. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Louise. Phase 1 complete, ready for Phase 2. Tom looked at Emma, then at Robert. In the past week, he'd lost his perfect image and his oldest business partner. But he'd gained something more valuable. Clarity. Phase 2, he typed back. Time to build something real. Outside the boardroom, Miami's business district hummed with activity, unaware that the rules of the game were changing. But up in his tower, Tom Blake was already planning the next move. The storm had passed, but the real work was just beginning. 2 weeks after the board meeting, Tom's office had transformed. Gone were the stark minimalist decorations and cold corporate art. In their place hung pieces from Emma's gallery, provocative works that questioned wealth, power, and responsibility. Most striking was the centerpiece, Louise's latest installation, a shattered mirror reassembled to spell out truth in razor-sharp fragments. Subtle, Emma remarked, entering with her tablet. The shareholders' meeting is confirmed for next week. We're expecting record attendance, more like record scrutiny. Tom reviewed the latest projections. The company's stock had stabilized after its initial surge, settling into what analysts called a correction phase. Every decision he made was being watched, analyzed, and questioned. His phone lit up with a message from Louise. Ready for your first transparency test. Check your email. Tom opened his laptop to find a detailed exposé about to be published in the Wall Street Journal. It outlined every questionable decision he'd made during his tenure as CEO, not just the ones involving Mark, but all of them. The ethical compromises, the aggressive tax strategies, the environmental corners cut. She's really not holding back, Emma observed, reading over his shoulder. Good. Tom's voice was firm. Can't build a new foundation on hidden cracks. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Blake, the team from Peter's group is here early. Send them in. Tom stood, straightening his tie. One of his old power ties, now worn with a different kind of confidence. William Peters himself led the delegation, his reputation for environmental advocacy preceding him. Tom, he nodded curtly. Interesting decoration choices. Consider it a statement of intent. Tom gestured for them to sit. I assume you've seen the Wall Street Journal piece? A comprehensive catalogue of corporate sins. Peters agreed. Most CEOs would be trying to bury it. I'm not most CEOs, not anymore. Tom pulled up the company's new transparency dashboard on the wall screen. Which is why I wanted you to see this first. Real-time tracking of every environmental impact from our operations. Every carbon emission, every water usage stat, every waste metric. Peters leaned forward, interested despite himself. This is live data, updated every 30 seconds, Emma confirmed, and publicly accessible starting next week. You're really doing it, Peters mused. When you announced these reforms, most of us thought it was damage control, a PR move after the Mark Harris scandal. It's not about PR anymore. Tom's voice carried the weight of conviction. It's about building something that matters. The meeting continued, diving deep into technical details and implementation timelines. As they wrapped up, Peters lingered behind. You should know, he said quietly. Franklin Pierce has been making calls, trying to organize opposition before the shareholders' meeting. Let him try. Tom smiled. Some fires need to burn so something new can grow. After Peters left, Emma pulled up another set of data. Speaking of fires, Louise's network just flagged something interesting. Pierce's connections to Vista Technologies went deeper than we thought. He wasn't just on the board, he was actively involved in the fraud scheme. Mark's mentor, Tom realized. The one who taught him how to hide corruption behind legitimate business. His phone buzzed. Louise again. Pierce is meeting with other old guard board members tonight. The Constellation Club, 8 p.m. Ready to crash another party. Tom showed Emma the message. She grinned, just like Miami. Should I bring lockpicks? No breaking and entering this time. Tom began typing his response. Something better? Pierce isn't the only one with friends at the Constellation Club. The next few hours were a whirlwind of calls and preparations. By sunset, Tom stood before his office windows, watching Miami's lights flicker on. The Wall Street Journal piece would break tomorrow, laying bare every mistake he'd ever made in pursuit of profit. But for the first time in his career, exposure didn't feel like weakness. The car's ready, Emma announced. Louise is already in position at the club. Sure you want to do this. Pierce and his allies, they're not just fighting your reforms, they're fighting for survival. Good. Tom grabbed his jacket. Because so am I, just not the way they think. They rode down in silence, both remembering that night 2 weeks ago when everything changed. The perfect life Tom had built had shattered, but like Louise's mirror installation, something truer was emerging from the fragments. His phone buzzed one last time, a message from Robert. Pierce just arrived at the club, with Regina Walsh and 3 other former Vista executives. Whatever you're planning, be careful. Tom showed Emma the message. Ready to help me crash another party. She linked her arm through his. Always. Though this time, try to remember what happens. The siblings stepped out into the Miami night, heading toward a confrontation that would determine not just the future of Blake Enterprises, but the very nature of corporate power. The old guard was gathering for one last stand, but this time Tom wasn't fighting alone. Behind them, Louise's shattered mirror caught the city lights, its fragments spelling out a truth that had become more than just art. It was a mission. The Constellation Club occupied the top 3 floors of Miami's oldest financial building, its wood-paneled walls and leather chairs unchanged since the 1920s. It was where deals were made, alliances forged, and occasionally, careers destroyed. Tonight, it would serve as the battlefield for 2 very different visions of corporate America. Tom and Emma arrived to find Louise already in position, posing as a journalist covering the club's historical architecture. She caught Tom's eye across the lobby, giving an almost imperceptible nod toward the second-floor library. Pierce and his group are upstairs, she murmured as they passed. Regina Walsh flew in from New York specifically for this meeting. They've also got Charles Davidson from the SEC and 2 federal judges. Pulling out all the stops, Emma observed. They're not just fighting your reforms anymore, Louise continued. They're fighting for their way of life. The Vista Technologies investigation is spreading. 3 more boards are under scrutiny. Pierce knows if your transparency initiatives become the new standard, the whole house of cards collapses. Tom finished. They climbed the curved staircase, their footsteps muffled by thick carpeting. Through the library's glass doors, they could see Pierce holding court, his silver hair catching the lamplight as he gestured emphatically to his assembled allies. "Ready?" Tom asked, straightening his tie. Emma squeezed his hand. "Remember, you're not the same man who used to seek their approval." Tom pushed open the doors, causing every head to turn. The conversation died instantly. "Well," Pierce recovered first, "if it isn't the crusading reformer himself, come to see how the other half plots your downfall." "Actually," Tom smiled, "I came to give you one last chance to do this gracefully." Regina Walsh laughed. "Gracefully? You're dismantling everything we've built." "No." Tom's voice hardened. "I'm exposing everything you've corrupted. There's a difference." He moved to the center of the room, command coming naturally despite being surrounded by hostile faces. "The Wall Street Journal is running a piece tomorrow. Full disclosure of every questionable decision I've ever made as CEO. Every compromise, every gray area, every time I chose profit over principle. Corporate suicide," one of the judges muttered. "Corporate evolution," Tom corrected. "Because unlike all of you, I'm not pretending to be perfect. I'm showing exactly how the system corrupts and how we can change it." Pierce stood, his facade of civility cracking. "You arrogant child. You think confession equals redemption? That transparency will save you? We built this world, Tom. We know where all the bodies are buried, including Richard Carter's." Louise's voice cut through the room as she entered. Several people gasped in recognition. Pierce's face went white. "You dare bring her here? She's not the only one." Tom nodded toward the doorway, where federal agents were quietly taking up positions. "Remember those judges you brought for protection? You really should have vetted them more carefully." Emma stepped forward, tablet in hand. "We've been gathering evidence for weeks. Every meeting, every call, every attempt to undermine Blake Enterprises' reforms, combined with the Vista Technologies investigation." "You're bluffing," Regina interrupted. "You wouldn't risk everything just to—" Her voice trailed off as Louise began playing a recording, Pierce's own voice detailing exactly how he'd mentored Mark Harris, how they'd perfected their fraud scheme across multiple companies. "Oh, that's inadmissible," Charles Davidson sputtered. "You can't—" "In a court of law, maybe not," Tom agreed, "but in the court of public opinion, in front of shareholders, combined with the FBI's legitimate evidence." Pierce's composure finally shattered. "You think you've won, that your precious reforms will change anything. There will always be another Mark Harris, another me. The system doesn't want to change." "No." Tom's voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the room. "The system doesn't, but people do. Right now, every major business publication is receiving documentation of tonight's meeting. Every scheme you've planned, every threat you've made, not from me, from your own colleagues who are tired of the old way." Around the room, faces began to shift. Several members of Pierce's coalition were already edging toward the doors, sensing the changing winds. "Tomorrow's shareholders' meeting isn't just about Blake Enterprises anymore," Tom continued. "It's about whether we continue to accept corruption as the cost of doing business. And you've just helped make my case for change. By destroying everything we built," Regina demanded, "by showing exactly why it needs to be rebuilt." Tom turned to address the whole room. "Anyone who wants to be part of that rebuilding is welcome. Anyone who doesn't, well, I'm sure the FBI has some questions about Vista Technologies." The next few minutes were chaos as Pierce and his closest allies were quietly taken into custody. Others rushed to distance themselves, suddenly eager to express their support for corporate reform. Through it all, Tom stood steady, Emma and Louise flanking him like sentinels. As the room cleared, Louise touched his arm. "You know this isn't over. There are more Pierces out there." "Good." Tom watched Miami's lights twinkling beyond the library windows. "Because we're just getting started." Emma checked her phone. "The Wall Street Journal piece just went live. Twitter's exploding. Blake Revolution is trending." Tom loosened his tie, feeling the weight of the past few weeks, no, the past few years, finally lifting. And send out the press release about tomorrow's shareholders' meeting. It's time to make it official. The death of the old way? Louise asked. No, Tom smiled. The birth of something better. Outside, a storm was rolling in off the Atlantic, lightning illuminating the city in brilliant flashes. But this time, Tom Blake wasn't afraid of what the darkness might reveal. He'd already faced his shadows and found his strength in the light of truth. The morning of the shareholders' meeting dawned clear and bright. Miami's usual humidity replaced by a crisp breeze that carried the promise of change. Tom stood in his newly renovated office, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of possibility. Louise's mirror installation caught the light, scattering truth across the walls in brilliant fragments. Ready for this? Emma entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd practically moved into the office over the past weeks, her artist's eye helping reshape not just the decor, but the company's entire visual identity. Ready or not, it's happening. Tom accepted the coffee, noting how different it felt from his old precision-crafted espressos. Richer, somehow, more real. How's the turnout looking? Standing room only in the main hall. We've had to set up overflow rooms with video feeds. The Wall Street Journal piece is the most read article in their history. She pulled up the latest numbers on her tablet. Social media's calling it a watershed moment in corporate America. Millionaire Blake Revolution has over 3 million mentions. Tom's phone buzzed. A message from Louise. Sunrise service at the chapel? He smiled at their code. The chapel was their nickname for the Sovereign Hotel's art gallery, where this had all started. In the weeks since Pierce's arrest, it had become their unofficial meeting spot, neutral ground, where the reformed CEO, the artistic crusader, and the corporate critic could plan their revolution. I'll meet you there, he replied. The gallery was quiet this early, sunlight streaming through its high windows to illuminate the new exhibition, Transparency, a collection of works exploring corporate reform and redemption. Louise stood before the centerpiece, a massive canvas showing a suited figure emerging from a chrysalis of shattered glass. The artist in me loves the symbolism of this morning, she said, as Tom approached. The dawn of a new era and all that. The cynic in you is wondering how long until the next Pierce or Mark Harris tries to corrupt it. She turned to face him. Are you sure about this? Once you make that speech, there's no going back. No more comfortable lies, no more easy profits. Good. Tom studied the chrysalis painting. I'm tired of comfortable lies. His phone buzzed again. Robert Chen this time. You need to see this. The attached video showed Franklin Pierce being led from his home in handcuffs, the FBI's Vista Technologies investigation having finally yielded enough evidence for arrests. Behind him, agents carried boxes of documents from a hidden safe, eerily similar to the one where Tom had found Mark's records. The old guard's last stand, Louise observed. No, Tom corrected. Their last gasp. The stand happens in there. He nodded toward the hotel's main conference center, where shareholders were already gathering. They walked together through the hotel's bustling corridors, their footsteps echoing off marble floors that had witnessed both Tom's fall and his resurrection. Emma waited by the conference room doors, her usual artistic chaos now tempered with corporate confidence. The press is ready, she reported, though fair warning, they're calling this everything from corporate suicide to the future of ethical business. Maybe it's both, Tom mused. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Shareholders filled every seat, their expressions ranging from skeptical to hopeful. The Wall Street Journal piece had laid bare every flaw in Tom's past, but had also revealed his vision for the future. Now it was time to see which would matter more. Tom took his place at the podium, aware of the weight of the moment. The cameras were rolling, the world was watching, and his carefully prepared speech felt suddenly inadequate. So he set it aside. 2 weeks ago, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. I stood in this hotel and watched my perfect life fall apart. I'd spent years building an empire on a foundation of half-truths and comfortable compromises. I thought that's what success looked like." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I was wrong. Success isn't about what you build, it's about how you build it. The system that allowed Mark Harris and Franklin Pierce to flourish isn't just corrupt, it's outdated. Today, we're not just voting on new corporate policies, we're voting on whether business can have a conscience." The next hour passed in a blur of presentations, questions, and debate. Emma laid out the financial projections, showing how ethical business could be profitable business. Louise, speaking as an independent expert, detailed how transparency could prevent fraud, and Tom, drawing on both his old authority and his new authenticity, painted a picture of a company that measured success not just in profits, but in impact. When the votes were finally tallied, the result was clear: overwhelming support for the reforms, but it was more than just a corporate victory. As shareholders streamed out, many stopped to share their own stories of wanting change, of hoping for better. Later, in his office, Tom, Emma, and Louise watched the sun set on their first day of the new era. "So," Emma asked, "what now?" Tom looked at the mirror installation, at the truth it reflected from every angle. "Now we prove it works. Show other companies it's possible. Build something that lasts. Together." Louise's question carried weights of possibility. "Together," Tom confirmed, "all of us. Different perspectives, different skills, same goal." His phone buzzed one last time, a message from William Peters. "Proud to be part of the revolution. When can we start implementing these changes industry-wide?" Tom smiled, sharing the message with Emma and Louise. Outside, Miami's lights began to twinkle on, each one a reminder of the lives their decisions would affect. The perfect life he'd once pursued now seemed like a distant dream, replaced by something far more valuable: purpose. "You know," Emma said, studying Louise's mirror installation, "sometimes things have to break before they can become what they're meant to be. And sometimes," Louise added, "the breaking is just the beginning." Tom looked at his sister, at Louise, at the city beyond, all the pieces of his new reality coming together in ways he never could have planned. "To beginnings," he said, raising his coffee cup. "To truth," Louise echoed. "To family," Emma finished. The three cups clinked together as Miami's evening star appeared, bright and steady in the darkening sky. The storm had passed, the truth had emerged, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, in this moment, Tom Blake was exactly where he needed to be, not at the top of a perfect empire, but at the start of an authentic journey. And this time, he wasn't walking alone. The end. That was a beautiful story, wasn't it? I hope you enjoyed it. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your collaboration is very important to me.